Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 118, Meno 88a to C. Meno wanted to avoid giving yet another answer about virtue, what virtue is, and he returned to his original question and simply asked Socrates to choose one of the options. What sort of thing is virtue? Is it teachable or exercisable or so on? Socrates couldn't give an answer because if he did, Meno would then go on to something else. He would be satisfied with getting Socrates' opinion. So Socrates has to somehow engage Meno in conversation about virtue. So Socrates dreams up a hypothesis about virtue. If virtue is teachable, it must be some sort of knowledge, episteme. This is incorrect because what is taught isn't necessarily knowledge or understanding, episteme, but Meno thinks that that is entirely what is taught and what is teachable. And so Meno agrees. Socrates then asks whether virtue is a good thing, and Meno says it is. This isn't surprising because virtue is the characteristic which anything good has, and Meno cannot think abstractly. For him, even virtue has to be a thing, which is why he also asked whether it is something teachable, something exercisable, and so on. Socrates then asks if a good thing is necessarily beneficial, and Meno says that it is. So now we have virtue being something beneficial. All that needs to be done now is to discover whether there is anything beneficial which is not connected with episteme. To that end, Socrates begins examining good things, and he starts with the group of external goods, health, wealth, beauty, and strength, and all these Meno agrees are good things. But Meno has just agreed that these good things are not only beneficial if they're used properly, but they can also be harmful if they are used badly. We should point out that something potentially harmful, if used correctly, will actually be harmful and not beneficial. If it is used incorrectly, it could still be harmful, and in rare cases it may actually be beneficial, but not necessarily. What made these things intrinsically good, whether they were used correctly or incorrectly? A properly functioning human would have beauty, health, and strength and wealth are expressions of ability. And we saw in Hippias Minor that ability was considered by the many to be a good thing in itself. Socrates is now going to turn to the goods of the soul, and these are actually types of virtue. He doesn't say that they are, but that is what they are. And we know that Meno knows that because he gave the list earlier. Etitoinon kai ta katatem psuchen skepsometha. And moreover, let's also examine the things according to the soul. Socrates could at least have said the good things according to the soul, as opposed to the external goods. And he could have said types of virtues, because that is what they are going to examine, types of virtues. The problem is that the whole point is to examine virtue itself. So he doesn't want to say types of virtues. If Meno actually responds for once with a bit of critical thinking, that would be a good thing. Socrates would like Meno to object. Sophrosunen ti kales kai dikaiosunen, kai Andrean, kai Eumathian, kai Mnemen, kai megaloprepean, kai pantata toyauta, egoge. Do you call something sound-mindedness and justice and courage and a good ability to learn? It's one word, eumathia. And memory and magnanimity and all such things? I do. The first three mentioned by Socrates are three of the four cardinal virtues: sound-mindedness, justice, and courage. The fourth is usually Sophia, expertise, wisdom. But instead of Sophia here, we have eumathia, a good ability to learn. And immediately after that, we have memory. And these are actually two qualities that Meno does have. He can learn very easily, and he does have memory. The problem is that he learns what he is told by teachers and regurgitates it, as we have seen when he recited Gorgias's answers about virtue. We recall from the beginning of the dialogue that Gorgias teaches people how to answer any question they are asked, so that they appear to be as one who knows. The last virtue in Socrates' list here is magnanimity, and that again is something which Gorgias teaches. People are more impressive when they can give many answers instead of the one that people expect them to give. Again, we saw that when Meno gave his first answer about virtue, and he ended up saying there are many virtues, and this was supposed to be an impressive answer. So Socrates' list falls into two halves. The first half are three philosophical virtues, cardinal virtues, 3 out of 4, and then we have 3 sophistic virtues. The first 3 are qualities of a healthy soul, while the sophistic virtues allow someone to appear to be good, whether being good or not. Scope de tuton hatasoidoke me episteme enai al allo epistemes uchi totemen blapte totete ophele. Examine then of these the ones which seem to you not to be knowledge, but something other than knowledge, if it is not the case that sometimes they harm and sometimes benefit. Hoion Andrea, me esti phronesis he Andrea, al hoion tharos ti, hotan men nous thare anthropos blaptetai, hotande synno, o pheletai. Nay. Such as courage. If courage isn't prudence, but some sort of fearlessness, isn't it the case that when a man is fearless without intelligence, he is harmed, but when he is fearless with intelligence, he is benefited? Yes. Socrates is piling on the mistakes, but Meno doesn't notice any of them. For example, if courage is a good thing, it is also a beneficial thing, according to Meno, and yet we find that courage is beneficial only when it is done with intelligence, but harmful when done without intelligence. Also, when distinguishing between with intelligence or without intelligence, courage suddenly becomes fearlessness. And this fearlessness is when courage isn't phronesis, prudence. In the real world, phronesis, prudence, is the name given to the umbrella virtue of which we have 4 cardinal virtues. They are the aspects of phronesis. And really, if courage isn't phronesis, it means that courage isn't an aspect of virtue. And yet, if it is then only fearlessness, does it really matter whether it's fearlessness with intelligence or without intelligence? But if fearlessness with intelligence is actually Andrea, courage, then it is a part of phronesis, an aspect of phronesis, prudence. Basically, Socrates is making a mess of basic terms in philosophy. Meno doesn't react at all, and he should have reacted. Uk un kai sophrosune hos autos kai eumathia, metamen nous kai manthanomena kai katartuomena ophelema, aniude nous blavera, panus fodra. So sound-mindedness is like this as well, and a good ability to study, eumathia, one word, with intelligence and being studied and being exercised, they are beneficial, but without intelligence they are harmful, very much so. Socrates doesn't even attempt to say what these virtues are when they are not aspects of phronesis. He doesn't even mention phronesis, prudence. What would sound-mindedness without intelligence be? What would good ability to study without intelligence be? Meno, as usual, isn't thinking critically and doesn't react. Well, Meno does react, he says very much so at the end, but this is simply what he thinks Socrates expects him to say. Uk un sulebden pantatates psyches epicheremata kai kateremata hegumenes men phroneseos es eudaimonian teluta aphrosynes des tunantion eoiken. So, in sum, all the attempts and enterprises of the soul, when phronesis, prudence, is guiding, result in eudaimonia, or the modern translation would be happiness. We'll have to talk about that again sometime. But when aphrosyne is guiding, aphrosyne is the opposite of phronesis here, but aphrosyne is also the opposite of sophrosyne, which is sound-mindedness. So this will be unsound-mindedness. So the attempts and enterprises of the soul, when unsound-mindedness is guiding, will lead to the opposite. In other words, kakodaimonia, misery.